My name is Doug Harris. I also have Tim Stobner. We're going to be your presenters, all focused on ArcGIS Pro and Introduction. And we also have Corey Kramer as well, our moderator and project engineer for ArcGIS Pro. Question for all of us. How many of us have utilized ArcGIS Pro before? Show of hands. Okay, great. Within this session, we're going to be discussing some of the overarching capabilities and features of ArcGIS Pro, and this is going to be that ArcGIS Pro and Introduction. Let's start off with some of the overarching features within ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro gives us the ability to create those 2D as well as 3D maps that we can use for visualization as well as for analysis in data science. Within ArcGIS Pro, we're going to be exploring the hundreds of geoprocessing tools that are available that will assist you with not only conducting analysis on your vector data, but as well as your raster data. Also, there is a capability of automation. There are three main ways that you can support the automation process within ArcGIS Pro. For those of us that utilize Python, you can incorporate in Python scripts inside of ArcGIS Pro. Also, you can create and utilize models directly within ArcGIS Pro. And for those of us that previously used ArcMap, you can also migrate or import in those models into ArcGIS Pro as well and utilize it. The third other automation capability is going to be tasks. So tasks are going to be a series of pre-configured steps that can guide users along a particular workflow. Since our world is constantly evolving and changing over time, ArcGIS Pro has a robust features for data editing as well as managing that large amounts of information that you may be working with. Sometimes we get questions, can ArcGIS Pro not be able to visualize and analyze your raster data as well as your imagery? And of course the answer is yes. So not only can you visualize your imagery, but you can also conduct analysis on it. And when we're thinking of some of the common imagery formats, it could be satellite imagery, it could also be some elevation data sets, as well as multispectral and hyperspectral imagery as well. There is a capability of incorporating artificial intelligence that will be useful for assisting you with some of your more complex spatial analysis tasks. And since many of us work in a collaborative environment, we may work for an organization or an agency, your organization or agency can deploy ArcGIS Pro throughout your organization as well. And lastly, ArcGIS Pro itself, it can be customized. We're going to see some demonstrations by Tim when we discuss the interface. The interface can be customized, as well as the overall capability of ArcGIS Pro can be extended by incorporating in add-ins as well as ArcGIS Pro SDKs as well. So let's discuss some of the additional features of ArcGIS Pro. And with that application, it's going to be a 64-bit multi-threaded application, and that processing power is going to assist us with visualizing as well as analyzing our data. We're going to be discussing the contextual user interface, but the user interface itself is contextual because we do not want to inundate users with too many tools and functionality. Also within ArcGIS Pro, you're able to combine that 2D and 3D experience. So for instance, you can have your 2D maps as well as have your 3D scenes. In this instance that we see on the slides, it's just going to be a map of Philadelphia and a 3D scene of some of the buildings in downtown Philadelphia. Many of the times you may start to work, when you start to work with ArcGIS Pro, you may begin to make multiple maps and multiple layouts. All of those maps and all of those layouts that you create are going to be a part of your project. Many of the times you can create multiple maps on different geographic areas, as well as start to create multiple layouts on those particular areas as well. We briefly discussed the geoprocessing power that is available within ArcGIS Pro, but overall there are hundreds of tools, geoprocessing tools that are available to assist us with both vector and raster analysis. And lastly, since there are a large number of tools that are available, if you take a look at our graphic up in the top center, this is where you can do a search for some of those common tools that you may be utilizing. You can simply type in, say for instance, a buffer. And then also on the right-hand side within that, within our catalog pane, you can also do a query for some of the data that is associated with your project. And continuing on with the ArcGIS Pro interface, as we mentioned, it's going to be a contextual interface. It's going to be based on a ribbon, and that ribbon is going to be categorized into tabs, and those tabs are going to be based on functionality. And that's what leads us into the idea of that the interface itself is very intuitive. If you want to do some types of analysis, you would go to your analysis tab. If you want to navigate within your map, you would go to your map tab. Very intuitive. Also, ArcGIS Pro is going to be project-based. We're going to see this with our upcoming demonstrations on the interface as a whole, but what we will see is within our catalog pane are all of the different items that make up our project. Many of us are going to be our cartographers and map makers. The application itself is going to be map-centric. Remember, you can work with both your 2D as well as your 3D data all within the same application. And it's going to be integrated. So with the idea that ArcGIS Pro is integrated, it is integrated with the ArcGIS system. Directly from ArcGIS Pro, you can start to share content to ArcGIS Online or your organization's ArcGIS Enterprise, as well as retrieve content from both of those locations as well. Before we get started with the upcoming demonstration, as we mentioned with the contextual ribbon, how our ribbon is going to be organized is going to be organized into tabs. Each of those tabs are going to be also categorized into groups. If we take a look within our graphic, we have what we call views. On the left, we have a 2D map, and then on the right, we have an example of a 3D scene. But we call those views, and not only can that contain your maps, but that could also contain, for instance, your tables, your attribute tables as well. We refer to the contents pane as well as the catalog pane. We refer to those as panes. Those are going to be your dockable windows, and you can move and maneuver them as needed. And then lastly, with the contents, if you take a look on the left-hand side, this is an example of a contents pane. This will list out all of the layers that are a part of your map. With that, we are going to take a look through a demonstration with Tim on an overview of ArcGIS Pro.
All right, thanks, Doug. All right, so I noticed there was a few out there that didn't raise their hand when Doug asked you if you had utilized Pro yet. So some of you might be the first time you've seen it. So we are just going to kind of introduce what it looks like first to open up Pro as an application, and then what a project looks like. So when you open Pro as an application, you're going to come to this start screen. From the start screen is where you can create your projects. Doug talked about you work with projects. So across the top, we have an option to do a project that will have a map, one that will open up catalog, and then the 3D scenes. There's also an option in Pro to start without a template. So these options at the top are called templates. If you do without a template, that means your project's just going to be in memory. So if you're just simply doing data management, you don't necessarily have to or don't need to create a project on your computer. You could always save that project afterwards. If we go off to the right, you're going to see where it says recent templates, or you can start with another template. This means you can create your own custom templates. You set up Pro project the way you want it, you save a template, and then you can recreate projects exactly the same way. Database connections, folder connections, things like that. As far as opening existing projects that you already have, I have a list of recent projects, but I can also use these dialogues to go out to your regular folders and go find an APRX that you can open up and have a project to work with. Just really briefly, I want to show the tab off to the left over here that says Learning Resources. This is just a way for you to quickly get to resources for more training. For example, there's tutorials, there's blogs. In Esri Academy, that's where Doug and I work as instructors, where you can get instructor-led courses as well. All right, so I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to grab this recent one. This is the project that I'm working on for this demonstration. And when it opens, you're going to see those things that Doug was talking about. All right, across the top are those tabs. And as Doug said, if you want to do analysis, you click analysis. If you want to do editing, you click editing. And we'll do those here a little bit later. The ribbon is broken up into these different groups. Right? So this is the ribbon, and then you can see the individual groups. And this is how you can assist to find the functionality or tools that you're looking for that particular process. Right? Contents pane on the left, catalog pane on the right. So one way you can look at this is the panes will only dock on the left and right side. You can do top and bottom, and left and right is always best. But just also be aware that the views that are maps, layouts, model builder, tables, you can also bring those out and float them if you want, right? And you, of course, could go ahead and dock it. And you can, as Doug showed on his slide, put things side by side as well. Okay. Now, we want to get to this idea of context sensitivity. This is the part I think that it makes the software intuitive, but it's not intuitive to realize what's happening there. So the way I like to describe this idea of context sensitivity is the software gives you what you need based on what you are working on or what you have selected, that kind of thing. So if I wanted to do symbology, for example, I don't have a tab for that right now. But if I click on campgrounds, now I have a feature layer tab. On the feature layer tab, I can do symbology and other visualizations. I have a labeling tab. So those of you that are familiar with layer properties, these are layer properties, right? So these are things that we can access through the ribbon versus going to a property window, right? And this goes even a little bit farther. So with labeling, notice that you have we have an option for point. Okay? If I switch to trails, now it says line. So it even recognizes what geometry you're working on. Okay? So the tabs, context sensitive, they will adjust. Your ribbon will adjust. But I also like to take it a step further and talk about how the panes will also adjust. So I'm going to click on feature layer and go ahead and open up symbology. That opens up the symbology pane over on the right side. And notice it says trails. If I click on campgrounds, now it says campgrounds. So you don't have multiple property windows to deal with. You have one window or one pane to do symbology. Same is true for labeling. Same is true for geoprocessing, for example. We'll see a bit later. Okay, so this is that idea of context sensitivity. Let's take this one more step. Let's go over here to the insert. All right, we'll insert a layout. And now that I have a layout active, we're going to go up here. This tab says layout, right? And I have my insert tab chosen. You notice I have layout information that I can add into my layout. If I go back to a map, now it's got map. Okay, so this is the idea of what do you have selected, what do you have active, what are you working on, and the ribbon will give you those things as you navigate through. Right? The catalog pane, right? So this is where we kind of interact with everything. We get to our data, we get to our databases and things like that. So Doug mentioned this is where maps and layouts are stored in your project. So you would access all your project information from here as well. So maps, you can have toolboxes and database connections within your project. You don't necessarily have to use them, but they're there for your convenience. Layouts are right here. This is where you would access styles, for those of you that do that. Folder connections are right here, and also locators are listed here as well. Right. I'm going to touch on something that Doug's going to mention in the next section, and that's favorites, because I utilize favorites extensively when I'm teaching. So those of you that are familiar with folder connections, right? This is where I can go over here and get to my data. Okay. The favorites are things, an example is folder connections. You can set those as favorites. Just right click on it and add it to your favorites. What I find really cool these are all the different classes that I teach. I can access all this content just like a folder connection, even though it's technically not a folder connection, it's just a favorite, but I can still access that content. And these favorites persist across all projects. That's the cool part. And speaking of project, one more tab we're going to look at is the project tab really briefly. This looks very similar to Office, right? You have new, open, save as, that's all there. But you can also see things like what portal you connected to, what is your licensing. But this is probably the big one. This is where you would set the different options. A few there for project, like units, but most of these are application level settings. So making adjustments to how you edit things, or if you're doing versioning, all those different kind of options to make adjustments. But Doug mentioned customization. This is where you would customize a new ribbon. So if you have certain functions that you do all the time, make yourself a tab, put all those functions in the ribbon, and it's always there. Application-wide, every project. All right, Doug, we'll take it back to you.
All right, thanks, Tim. So what can you do with ArcGIS Pro? So within ArcGIS Pro, you can conduct analysis both with your vector data, your points, lines, and polygons, as well as your raster data, such as some types of satellite imagery. As Tim had mentioned, since many of the times you may have multiple sources where your data is going to be stored at, remember the important concept that Tim had just discussed. Not only can you add those file, database, and server connections and make those persistent across your project, but there's also capability, if we take a look at the graphic on the right-hand side, you can also add it to new projects as well. Meaning that if you start a brand new project, those folder connections, those geodatabase connections, they will be persistent. And with that second bullet, it's going to be on a per user basis. We're going to be discussing licensing and how to log into ArcGIS Pro later on in this session, but just think of logging into ArcGIS Pro, creating a project, establishing those favorites, then opening up and creating a brand new project. Those folder connections, database connections, they will be persistent if you add those to new projects. So now let's discuss analysis. So as we mentioned, ArcGIS Pro has a robust analytical capability. There are hundreds of geoprocessing tools that are available to assist us with that vector as well as raster analysis. As we mentioned, how we could access that is if you take a look at the graphic down below, it's going to be within your analysis tab. And right below where it says analysis, we have an option for tools. And what will happen if we were to select tools, and we will see this with an upcoming demonstration, is if we take a look at the graphic and towards the top right, our geoprocessing pane will open up. And many of the tools that are available are going to be interactive as well. And also, within that geoprocessing pane, you can utilize a free text. So for instance, if you are doing a buffer, you could type in buffer and identify that particular tool, or type in clip and then identify that particular tool. We see down in the center of that graphic is an example of the model builder. So model builder is a way for us to visually represent some type of geographic workflow where we can start to incorporate in several geoprocessing tools, chain them together, and then be able to run them as needed and run them again and again as well. For those of us that work with Python, you can also incorporate in custom Python scripts via the Python window within ArcGIS Pro as well. A unique capability that's available is raster functions. And with raster functions is as if you are working with a raster data set. As opposed to doing some type of geoprocessing, utilizing a geoprocessing tool which would create a brand new output, you can utilize a raster function, and those processing will only be applied to those pixels. Okay, think of it as a virtual layer. And then lastly, the analytical capabilities are going to be extendable. We're going to have some additional resources at the conclusion of this presentation, but definitely remember ArcGIS Solutions. A lot of add-ins are available, and as Jack had mentioned yesterday, they're free. that can extend the capability of ArcGIS Pro. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim. We're going to explore some of the analysis capabilities available within ArcGIS Pro.
All right, thanks, Doug. Okay. Fortunately, a little bit of technical difficulty here. I'm not exactly sure. Lost my internet. And I'm waiting for a map to refresh. And okay. All right, give me 1 second here. I'm going to get this reset.
Before we begin with the demo, are there any initial questions so far? Anybody in the audience would like to ask about ArcGIS Pro? Yes. Yes, the question was, can you create a template and can you share it? Yes, and yes you can. We'll be discussing sharing. And basically what a template is going to be very useful for is many of the times organizations have organizational standards, and you can think of the term as a template as a starting point. So you can create map templates and layout templates and more. So we'll be discussing sharing, and yes you can. Yes.
Actually, you want to go? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a mic.
Oh, okay. Well, I just actually found out yesterday that you can.
Yeah, so the question was, if you have customized the ribbon, right, customized those tools that you have, can you share that? And the answer is yes. You're able to export that as a customization file, and then you could deploy that. You could share it to people individually, or you could send it around to folks in your organization.
I'm up, right? So this is what Corey was talking about, this ability to export your customizations. All right, okay, we're good to go now. All right, we're going to talk about geoprocessing. So as we mentioned, you go to the tab for the functionality that you're trying to do. So in this case, it's going to be the analysis tab. On the far left, we have our history button. We can also access Model Builder in Python from here. That's all part of analysis. Doug mentioned the tools button. So with tools, that's going to open up the geoprocessing pane. All right. In the geoprocessing pane, we can search, and I'll do that here in just a little second. Now, we talked about favorites. This is relatively new, last couple versions with Pro. It's really, really cool because you can create my favorites, which is application-wide. That means my favorites, if you add anything there, you just right-click a tool and add it to my favorites, and it will persist across all projects. There's also a section for project favorites. So each individual project can have its own favorites as well. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I like that one. All right, we're going to go just do a simple analysis here just so you can see how the process works within Pro. So right now I have a pairwise buffer tool here in my favorites. I just click on that and I can go ahead and fill this out. And what I'm going to do is buffer some water bodies here. And I'm going to buffer them by 1/4 mile. And my goal here is to determine which of these campgrounds are going to be within that 1/4 mile buffer area. I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm also going to dissolve every polygon all into one single polygon. For certain processes going forward, that would be really handy. Now, the pairwise buffer tool allows the system to utilize all the fancy processing power that my computer has. So even though I'm really technically running two different tools, this is going to run fairly quickly. And it's already done. Okay. Now, the next step. Now, a lot of you know there's a lot of different ways I can determine what campgrounds are inside these buffers. But what I want to do is just to do a simple select. But I also want to point out something here that's going to be pertinent to all these panes that you work with. It's this little arrow. Right? So that little arrow tells you you're kind of what I call the backside of the pane. Right? To get back to the front page, just click that arrow, and now I'm back where I am. Okay? We mentioned searching. This is one of the things I really like about the way Pro works, because if I search for, let's say, a select, right, I want to select something, not only do I get tools that have the word select in their title, but if I scroll down, I also get all these other tools that just have select function within them. So you don't have to have a very specific name of the tool to find something. So the select process, or the search tool works really, really well. All right, another thing I want to show is how you can work in the geoprocessing pane, but we also have pop-up dialog boxes that you can utilize as well. So I'm going to click on Select by Location. A lot of you are probably familiar with this tool. And I can go ahead and fill this tool out. I want to select campgrounds based off of those buffers I just created. Okay? So now I could run that. But if I go back to my Map tab, there's a shortcut to that tool here in the ribbon. This is going to open up this dialog box. What this allows you to do is if you have say for example, have a large processing going on in the background, I could still run this tool from here because it runs independently. So that's the purpose of these boxes. You'll notice that it came up with water bodies pairwise buffer, right? It's already populated there. And a lot of you thinking, why is that there already? I didn't select that, right? Context sensitivity. That layer is selected, so Pro says, oh, that's what you want to use, that's what I'm going to put in here. Okay? So if I close that box and I click on campgrounds, now I click open it again, it has campgrounds. So I can go ahead and do my selection. If I click apply, it's going to leave the window open, which can be kind of handy, but if I click OK, it's going to close the window. And it'll go ahead and make that selection for me. But here's something that's really cool, and I believe this is as of 3.0. If I reopen that window, it'll come back exactly the way I left it. All right. Doug mentioned Model Builder. I'm just going to do just a little brief thing here on Model Builder, especially for those who haven't seen it yet. Go back to Analysis tab, click on Model Builder. It's going to open up in the middle. That means Model Builder is a view. Right? Up at the top, it has a Model Builder tab now, not Map tab. It has Model Builder, and I have all my Model Builder functions within that ribbon. If you want Model Builder to float, you can, just like all the other views that you want to work with. Right, I'm going to go back over to my geoprocessing pane, go back to my front page, or actually it went to the search, because that's where I was before. If I clear my search, then it's going to ahead and go back to where I was. So I can just simply grab that buffer tool, bring it into my model. Let's say, for example, I want to do clip instead of select, so I can bring that tool in. One thing I have learned the hard way through my years of using Model Builder is don't use layers, because if I was to use the layers and this map wasn't in my project and I try to use this model, it wouldn't be able to find it. So always bring in your data from your database when you're using a model. So I can bring in campgrounds, water bodies, right? And you'll notice I'm not really lining things up. I'm just kind of ad-libbing here a little bit. So I want to buffer my water bodies. So I'm going to click, hold, drag, and drop, and that's going to be my input features. But I still need to double click it to add in my distance. Right, now the tool's ready to go. So I'm going to add water bodies, the buffers as my clip features. Again, click, hold, drag. This is going to be my input. And now my model is all lit up. It's ready to go. And I come up here, click Auto Layout, and boom, I can start using it. Okay. All right, good. All right, Doug, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Say that one more time. Yes, yes. So models are saved in the toolboxes, right? And you can transfer those to any model you want to work with. Okay? Really, technically, models are not part of a project like a map is. It's a separate file.
All right, hey, thanks, Tim. Going to continue on, and we're going to discuss editing. So as we know, our real world features, our environment is actually always constantly changing. So within ArcGIS Pro, we have a robust editing capability. Not only can we edit those 2D features, such as those points, lines, and polygons, but we can also edit those 3D features as well to create some very visually appealing downtown images, for instance. Whenever we initially start ArcGIS Pro, currently there is no need to start and stop a editing session, and which is why we went that process is for creating a more simplified editing sessions. Not only can we edit shape files, but we can also edit files as well as enterprise geodatabases that contains those feature classes. So we can edit those feature classes as well. And we had a question about templates. Group templates are going to be available as well, but basically what a group template is think of if you have two templates, one for a line, one for a point, you can group them together so that when you go through that editing process, that point could be, for instance, connected up to that line. For instance, a water lateral to a water meter. And then lastly, with the idea of a geodatabase and as well as map topology, we can incorporate those in to assist us with identifying spatial errors with our data sets. And if we take a look at the graphic, we're going to see this with the upcoming demo as well, focused on editing. You're able to open up your Create Features pane. So for instance, if I want to create an additional parade route, I could select that parade route, select that line, or maybe another tool, maybe start to generate perpendicular lines. Since our world is constantly changing, you can also modify those features. Think of moving a feature from one location to another. And then also with the idea of managing templates as well. In addition to what we had discussed with managing templates, they are also very useful if you want to incorporate in some default attributes. Remember, those attributes are going to give you a description for those points, lines, and polygons that you see represented on your maps. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, and we're going to take a look at editing within ArcGIS Pro.
All right, and thanks, Doug. Okay, I want to do a little bit of logistics here as I get into this editing process, because that's something that you may need to do along the way. And one of the things I always like to show is the quick access toolbar. This is a Windows thing, you may have seen it there. So as an instructor, I have added certain things that really are beneficial to me, and ironically, clear selection. So I can clear, no matter what ribbon I'm on, I can clear my selection. And when you're editing, that's a really good idea to do before you start. I also utilize bookmarks a lot. So I want to go to this Alpha Lake bookmark. So I can do that from the quick access toolbar. I don't have to switch my ribbons. So things can be really, really convenient. Doug mentioned that we're going to have the Create Features pane, the Modify pane, and the Attribute pane. Those are the three panes that you would typically use when you're editing. Not everybody uses the Attribute pane, but it'll be there too. So another really nice, quick shortcut that I really love in Pro is the Reset panes. So right now, currently, if you look at the lower right down there, I have catalog, symbology, and geoprocessing, because that's what I've worked with so far. If I reset my panes to editing, it closes those panes I don't need and opens the panes I do need. Single click instead of close, close, open, 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 I'm done. Right? Now, what we're doing, editing. We're going to go to the Edit tab, and here's where you can see where I could have opened those panes manually if I wanted to. We're going to actually start this process with modification, and modify tools are all listed in one modify pane, modify features pane. And you just grab the tool that you're looking for, and it's also by default listed out by category, by the type of tool that it is. So if I wanted to make adjustments to this trail, you can see it's not lining up with the trail that's on the base map. I could click on Edit Vertices. Right? I can manually make changes to that line. Look at the top here. And Pro is saying, make a selection. It literally says what you need to do. So if you modify something, it needs to be selected. But if you notice, this is my cursor is now the select tool. The select tool is not active. Software is smart enough to give you the tool you need for what you're currently doing. Once I select that line, right? Now I can go ahead and make changes to my vertices. Okay? Down at the bottom is a toolbar. I can modify vertices, I can add vertices, or I can delete vertices. So I could go about this process if I want to. I'm not going to show everybody how to edit, but notice I just made a change, right? But I haven't finished any sketch or anything like that yet. So my editing options up here at the top, my 2 buttons, are still grayed out. That really technically means I haven't really made any edits yet, so I haven't really started editing just yet, not until I would finish a sketch. I have a black X where I can just undo everything that I've done currently as far as a sketch. And what I'm going to do is utilize that back arrow, like I showed you before. Again, all these panes have, and I shouldn't say all, most have the back arrows because you're going to be in like a back page. And I'll grab a different tool. Because my features are already selected, it's going to be all ready to go. If you haven't used the reshape tool, I encourage you to do that if you're doing editing. So now what I have for a toolbar down below is technically a create toolbar where I can create or I can draw a sketch. So I can redraw this line and I can use snapping to do that, but I don't have to. So I snapped to begin with, and I'm not going to make this perfect because I just want to run across that line this way, and then in the end I'm going to snap back. Now I can come down here and finish a sketch just like I would if I was creating. When I finish this sketch, it's going to redraw that line for me. Right? Now, my 2 buttons are lit up. Now I can save or discard as needed. Right? And as long as I don't do one of these 2, I can continue to undo. Once I make one of these options, and I'm going to discard what I did, right? Now they're grayed out. I have now stopped editing, right? And now I can no longer undo. Now, let's do create. So I'm going to go up here to my ribbon. I have a delete button. So I can delete that line that's already there, and I want to start fresh instead of trying to redo what's already there. Doug mentioned group templates, right? And it just so happens I do have a group template available here, and really they're pretty cool. I don't know, this is going to work. All right. So notice it says trails, line feature, primary. So when I use this template, it's going to draw a trail. But it's also going to add a trailhead, and it's going to add it at the beginning of my line. And because in this particular project that we'd be working on, all these trails are messed up, as you can tell. So I'm going to start my trail here at the intersection where it's supposed to be. And I'll click, and I'm just going to add a couple of vertices here, not perfect, and go ahead and finish my sketch. And now you can see there's 2 features there. If I go to my attribute pane, where I can make changes to my attributes, I can click on these, and it'll highlight that I do have a trailhead and I do have a trail. Go ahead.
Can you double click to end your line, or you have to click to finish?
There's 4 options for finishing a sketch. Double clicking is one of those. Just to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page, I'm going to start a new line here. All right. And I can double click, but my double click needs to be the last vertex, because if I double click now, it's going to be somewhere else. All right. I got to throw this in here. I would not be a good editor because arthritis has caused me to have things that don't work the way they're supposed to. I will very often accidentally double click. You can turn that off. You can turn off double click if you're in that situation. Okay? It's a pretty cool option. Right. One more thing. Project tab, options, and there's editing options here. I want to do something really quick here to show these little dialog box options that are in the different groups, right? With the Edit tab selected, right, this little dialog box launcher will take me directly to my editing options. Those launchers do different things. Not always going to take you to options. It could be a settings. It could be a pane. Just hover and see what it does. Check out those dialog boxes. And what I came here to show you is this option here. All right. So we're going to assume that there's some ArcMap users in here and you really want your start and stop editing. Can't give it to you, but we can give you the option to disable editing. Go, click it, click OK. Now I have an additional button here on my ribbon. I'm going to go back to my Create Features pane so I can show you how this works. If I click it to deactivate it, oh, all right, I have uncommitted edits that say, hey, you got to do something with this. I'm going to just discard what I did. All right. All my templates are gone. I cannot edit anything at this point. I have to go ahead and click on Edit to get back. Yeah, go ahead.
How you said it created a trailhead at the beginning from when you started.
Mm-hmm.
How did it know how to do that? Because if you just create a simple line, is there a way you have to attribute the polyline for it to know that it's a trail?
You would literally create a group template. I'm not going to go through that process, but they're really easy to do. And it allows you to set up exactly what you want to do. Yeah.
How do you reconcile post or edits?
Versioning, right? So asking about posting and things like that still works relatively the same way. I don't have versioning on this computer, so I can't show you anything, but it's pretty straightforward. You want to say any more?
No, it's versioning. I mean,
It's
if you
versioning,
work with
yeah.
versioning now, you
Yeah.
still can work with versions and reconcile.
Yeah. You're not seeing it because I don't have versioning on my computer.
It's a little more advanced.
That's it. That's what it boils down to. Yep. Part of the context sensitivity, I suppose, right? Okay.
There's no right clicking your cursor, right?
Right.
Right click menu.
Oh, yeah. Let's go back to create and grab a template. Whoops. Okay. All your right clicks are there. I should have showed this one earlier for contents pane. It's all there. Okay.
It's also contextual. If you're in your Explore tool and you right-click, you'll get different options. If you're in the Editing tool and you right-click, you'll get the editing options.
Yep. So depending on what tool you have, that's the right click you're going to get. Yep. So Corey was just mentioning I also have the Explore tool, my quick access toolbar, so I don't have to go back to the ribbon to do that. Got to apply what I was just doing, and your right click options will be different. Very cool. Yep. Right, Doug, take it back
All
to
right,
you.
thank you. Hey, thanks, Tim. So I'm going to continue on, and we are going to discuss mapping and visualization. So with ArcGIS Pro, with every new update, we start to see more improvements with the drawing, as well as the performance and overall quality of ArcGIS Pro. As we had discussed, you can incorporate in multiple layouts. They will be a part of your project. As Tim had discussed as well with symbology, we also have a variety of symbology tools and methods, for instance, transparency and layer blending if you want to emphasize certain features within your maps. We had discussed and working a lot with 2D data, but with 3D cartography, within ArcGIS Pro, you can convert that 2D map into a 3D scene. When we're talking or working with 3D data, you could create either a local scene or a global scene. And the best way to distinguish between the two, think of a local scene, you're more so zoomed in. Global scene, you're further zoomed out, starting to incorporate in the curvature of the earth. Map series are also available within our application as well. If you want to generate a series of pages based on your layouts at different geographic locations. We're going to be discussing reports within ArcGIS Pro 3.0. There was an update to reports to not only include your attributes and some of your statistical analysis based on your attribute values, but also be able to add in your maps to those reports as well. And then lastly, animation. You are able to create and collect keyframes and then generate some types of animations and export them out in a variety of different formats. For instance, MP4 as well as GIFs. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim. We're going to take a look at mapping within ArcGIS Pro.
All right, we are going to do some basic things here, basic symbology, but also discuss this idea of having 3D, 2D, and 3D in the same software. So context sensitivity is going to play a role here again, and understanding what to do to get where you need to go to do symbology. So I showed you earlier where I could access symbology through that feature layer tab, which isn't here right now because I don't have a layer selected, right? So I would need to do that. But there's also right-click context menus. That was brought up a little bit ago, so it made me think about this. You can also access symbology from there as well. So always have multiple options. Oop, now I just clicked on the wrong thing. All right, so here's my symbology pane. One of the things I will tell you, at some point you're going to be doing symbology and you're going to be looking at your map and your map is not going to change. You probably have the wrong layer selected. Just happened to me yesterday, or Sunday. It will happen to you, right? So changing symbology is all done within the pane. So I could change this to graduated colors. I change the field that I want to use. And of course, I still have all my classification methods, all my number of classes, all my different color ramps. But Pro does have some really cool thing here where instead of just having a standard color ramp, like solid color, where you go, I'm not sure what color it's going to be, it has these defined colors coming from Color Brewer, and it's a lot easier to understand what your colors are going to be. So just like that, I've got some symbology here. Now, Doug mentioned converting 2D to 3D. I would technically go to my View tab and convert, and this is where I convert. I'm not going to do that live. I already have a 3D scene here ready to go. And here again, I can do a little bit different kind of symbology. Again, I don't have the tabs that I need, so I'm going to select my layer. I'm going to go to Feature Layer, and here I'm going to use something called Extrusion. And I'm going to use the max height, which is going to give me a nice flat top. And I'm going to use that same field, building height, because it tells us what building heights are in meters. And this will take just a little bit to finish. There we go. She comes up. Oh, I knew that was going to happen.
I'm not sure.
Nope, different one.
I got one. Go, keep going, Tim. I got one.
Okay, all right. I don't think it's going to let me keep going, though.
It's not close.
Yep, it's going to close, so go ahead.
No, it's just going to close that.
Oh, okay. All right, it's going to let me keep going. All right, sorry about that. All right. But here's something. Oh, we've got one. We've got one, yeah. This is something that's even better, though. I can still use that same graduated color symbology option. So not only in the same 3D scene, I can do color, I can also do that extrusion, and we can really see what our buildings look like. Now, one thing I want to kind of make sure everybody's aware of with this extrusion, right? This is not true 3D features. It's just extruding the polygon. I still have 2D features in here. This is the Capitol building in Austin. It's got a great big dome. It's not going to show you that dome. It's just going to show you how tall, on average, that building is. All right, so I'm your guy with the technical issues. You'll remember that going forward. All right, okay, so just to make sure we get through what I want to get through here. All right, layouts, another part of mapping. All right, so I had created a layout earlier, right? So that's still here in my view. You'll notice that it's empty. So I do need to start from scratch. What's really nice here is I have access to all the maps that are in my project. What you're seeing here are a couple different things. The ones with the scale on here are the ones that are open, and that's the extent they're at currently. You also have bookmarks in here, so you can see that Alpha Lake that I used. So I can just grab this 3D scene. Wow. All right, Doug, it's up to you.
All right. Hey, we're going to, we had a question about sharing. So how about we discuss sharing? When we're thinking of sharing directly from ArcGIS Pro, when you're working and creating those web maps, think of working with your 2D features. You can share that directly to your ArcGIS portal. So it could be either ArcGIS Online or it could be ArcGIS Enterprise. In addition to those web maps that represents those 2D features, you can also share out those 3D web scenes. And those web maps and those web scenes are going to be accessible from any of the 4 major browsers that are out there now. In addition to sharing out web maps and web scenes, you can also share out packages. So think of a package as a consolidated file. It could be a map package, so that map package would contain your map plus all of your layers associated with your map. It could be a layer package, which would be your layer with the applied symbology as well as the attributes. And also project packages. I really like project packages because many of the times in our organizations and agencies, we need to make backups. So you can use a project package to make a backup of your project, as well as utilize those project packages for new employees as well. Map and layout files, those are going to be useful. We had a question earlier about sharing out templates, but also those map and layout files are also useful working within an organization if your organization has those organizational standards. So think of a layout file where you would have an instance where the north seeking arrow would be up in the top left corner, and that would be applied to all other further layouts, for instance. We had briefly discussed task files. Tasks are a series of pre-configured steps that can guide a user along a series of geoprocessing workflows or data management workflows. And a key takeaway with that is that those task files can also be shared out and available to other users as well. Within Pro, just to wrap up with sharing, of course you could print directly to a printer or to a plotter, adjust those page settings as needed, and then also export out those maps in a variety of different formats. Think of PDF files, JPEG files, and more. Lastly, many organizations have some custom symbology. If we have any previous ArcMap users, the file extension that's used within ArcGIS Pro is the .stylex file, but it's the same idea. It's a way for you to symbolize your data so that your maps are better understood by your customers and team members. Tim had previously discussed this, but just to reiterate, something that you will see with ArcGIS Pro 3.0 when you first get started, as Tim had showed, the options of starting a brand new project or opening up a recent project, but also up in the top right corner, this is going to show your instance of how ArcGIS Pro is licensed. And based on those, how you're licensed, that's going to impact your functionality within ArcGIS Pro, and we're going to discuss that a little bit later on. But the key takeaway is this, is that when you start ArcGIS Pro, as Tim had discussed, you can create a brand new project, or you can open up a previous project as well. For any prior ArcMap users, there is an option of importing in a map. So ArcMap utilized that file extension .mxd, which is a map document, so you can import in that map plus that layout. And what you would see once that was imported into ArcGIS Pro, it's going to be seamless. It's going to be exactly how it looked within ArcMap. In addition to working with ArcMap, if we have any users that have used ArcScene or ArcGlobe, you can also import that in as well. Previously, within ArcMap, you could create map packages. You can also import in those map packages as well. Think of a map package as that consolidated file with your map, with all of your layers. We had discussed this idea of licensing, and what I would like to, moving in towards the end of this presentation, is discuss licensing because it's going to be very important, especially when working within an organization or if we have any administrators or soon-to-be administrators in the audience. There are three main licensing methods that are available. The first one that you see in that cloud graphic is going to be a named user. And many of the times this is going to be a default. So real world within your organization, your administrator would provide you with a username and password. And you can use that to log in and access and utilize ArcGIS Pro. Another option is on the left-hand side where it says single use. That single use is going to be available and tied to one machine, meaning that I can log into that machine and start to utilize ArcGIS Pro. Another option that is used many of the times in larger organizations and agencies is going to be the concurrent use, meaning that folks will be able to think of checking out a license, access ArcGIS Pro, as long as they are on that network within their agency. Kind of continuing on with the licensing options, how you can access this, as Tim has shown us before, if you select that project button, that would take us backstage, and you would have an example of accessing the licensing. And with this graphic in the top right corner, we have three types: basic, standard, and advanced. And as you go from basic, standard to advanced, you will have a increased capability and functionality available within ArcGIS Pro. But more importantly is the graphic in the bottom. Once you have logged into ArcGIS Pro think of if you're using that named user license, ArcGIS Pro is integrated tightly with ArcGIS Online. You'll be able to access and utilize that content as well. Concurrent use license, as we discussed, mainly used within very large organizations where individuals can check out those licenses. Single use will be applied and tied to one computer.
Because there is something that I want to show everybody here. All right, so sometimes when things go wrong, you get to show something that's really cool. So everybody might want to take a look up front here. Back up, right? Those of you who come from ArcMap, never was such a thing.
It's a big request.
Yep, so now all those mapping things I did, all that symbology, I didn't lose it, it's still here. Now it's going to take a second for it to come back up, but we're good to go. So let's go back to our layout really quick. This time I'm going to add 2D instead of 3D. That'll help. So with elements, you just simply choose them, click and drag to add them in. All right. When you're working in a layout, as far as changing properties, right-click properties. That's something that a lot of people are already doing. That's going to open up the element pane. Context sensitivity means that I can go to any element, and that's the pane I'm going to be using throughout, right? Including the map frame. Right. Sharing, or just really quick, this is where the sharing options are that Doug was just talking about. So if I go back to a map, I'm going to have a lot more options here. So this is where you would do that. And then Doug talked about accessing the portal. It's just another tab in your catalog pane. So everything you're seeing here right now in my catalog is all the things I have in my organization in ArcGIS Online.
That's going to wrap up our presentation. We want to thank you all for attending. I'm going to just leave up this slide. These are going to be some additional learning resources. Esri training is going to be very, very useful. That's where you can access some web-based training as well as some instructor-led training, and then also Learn ArcGIS as well, where you can access and utilize a variety of different types of learning materials.